Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
My phone buzzed during my afternoon meeting at the construction site, and I almost ignored it. But when I saw Emma's name flashing on the screen, something in my gut told me to answer. My 16-year-old daughter was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words through the static and chaos in the background. She kept repeating something about Aunt Tracy and her brand new Honda Civic, the one she had worked 2 years at Scoop's Ice Cream to buy with her own money. Then she said the words that made my blood freeze. Tracy had crashed the car into an oak tree on Maple Street and told the police that Emma was driving. My parents were standing right there, backing up every lie my sister told the officers. Emma was about to be arrested for reckless driving and insurance fraud, and she was only 16 years old. I dropped my hard hat and ran to my truck, leaving my foreman Dave standing there with blueprints in his hands. The drive to Maple Street felt like an eternity, even though it only took 12 minutes through downtown traffic. When I pulled up to the scene, my heart sank. Emma's pristine silver Honda Civic was wrapped around the massive oak tree like a crumpled piece of paper steam, still rising from the destroyed engine block. Officer Rodriguez was interviewing Emma near the patrol car, his notepad out and pen moving quickly. As she shook her head frantically, Tracy stood about 15 feet away, dabbing at a bandaged cut on her forehead with a tissue. Tears streaming down her cheeks, in what I recognized as her signature performance cry. She had perfected that look during our childhood, whenever she broke something and needed our parents to believe it was an accident. I tried to stop her. Tracy was saying to Officer Martinez, the second responding officer. Emma begged me to let her drive to the store. She said she was a good driver, that she had been practicing. I should have said no, but she seemed so confident. Then she started speeding down this street, and I told her to slow down, but teenagers think they know everything. When I grabbed the wheel to help her, we hit the tree. I feel terrible that I did not do more to prevent this. My parents, Robert and Linda, stood behind Tracy like a wall of support. Dad nodded grimly at every word, his gray beard bobbing with each confirmation. Mom clutched her purse strap and dabbed at her eyes with a crumpled tissue. They had driven over from their house on Elm Street, just 3 blocks away, the moment Tracy called them instead of calling 911 first. Emma saw me approaching and ran over, her face red and swollen from crying. Dad, I swear I was not driving. Aunt Tracy took my keys from the kitchen counter when I was upstairs doing homework. She said she needed to run a quick errand and would be back in 20 minutes. I heard the crash from my bedroom window. When I ran outside, she was already on the phone telling someone that I had been driving and lost control. I knelt down to look Emma in the eye, studying her face for any sign of deception. But I knew my daughter better than anyone in the world. Emma had never lied to me about anything significant. Not even when she accidentally broke my favorite coffee mug last spring, or when she got a detention for talking during math class. She was the kind of kid who confessed to mistakes before I even discovered them. Officer Rodriguez approached us with his report clipboard. Sir, are you the father? I need to get some information from you about the vehicle registration and insurance. Your daughter here is going to be cited for reckless driving and potentially charged with operating a vehicle without proper adult supervision. Wait, I said, holding up my hand. Let me understand what happened here. My sister Tracy claims that Emma was driving when this accident occurred. That is correct, Rodriguez replied. Ms. Tracy Brennan has provided a detailed account of the incident. She states that your daughter requested permission to drive the vehicle to a nearby convenience store. During the trip, your daughter allegedly lost control while traveling at excessive speed on this residential street. I walked over to examine the car more closely. Something nagging at the back of my mind. The driver's seat was pushed all the way back, positioned for someone much taller than Emma. My daughter stood 5 feet 2 inches tall, while Tracy measured 5 feet 8 inches. When Emma drove, She always had to scoot the seat forward and adjust the mirrors. "Dad," Emma whispered as I returned to her side. "Look at where the seat is positioned. I always have to move it up to reach the pedals properly." I was about to point out this discrepancy when my father appeared at my elbow. "Joel, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" His voice carried that familiar tone of authority that he had used throughout my childhood, the one that meant I was expected to comply without questions. We walked about 20 feet away from the scene near the Martinez family's mailbox. Dad glanced around to make sure nobody could overhear our conversation, then leaned in close to my ear. "Son, I need you to think very carefully about what you say here today. Tracy owes some very dangerous people a significant amount of money. If she gets arrested for this accident, she will expose some financial arrangements that your mother and I have made to help her. Arrangements that could get us all into serious trouble with the Internal Revenue Service." "What kind of arrangements?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand. "Tracy borrowed $47,000 from our retirement account over the past year. She has been gambling at underground poker games in the city, and things got out of control. We have been claiming false business expenses through Sunset Lawn Care to cover the loans we took out to replace the retirement money. If Tracy goes down for this crash, she will tell the authorities everything to save herself from jail time." I stared at my father in disbelief. "You are asking me to let my 16-year-old daughter take the blame for Tracy's mistake so you can avoid tax evasion charges? I am asking you to consider what is best for this family as a whole," he replied. "Emma will get a citation and some community service. The insurance will cover the car repairs. But if this situation escalates, your mother and I could lose our house, our business, and our freedom. Tracy could face serious criminal charges. Is one teenager's driving record worth destroying 3 adult lives?" I looked back at Emma, who was watching our conversation with growing anxiety. Officer Rodriguez was filling out paperwork on his clipboard, preparing to issue citations. Tracy continued her sobbing performance, now being comforted by my mother, who kept repeating, "It was just an accident, sweetheart." These things happen with young drivers. For the first time in my life, I truly understood how corruption begins. It starts with small compromises, with families protecting their own interests over truth and justice. It starts with good people making bad choices because the consequences of honesty seem too devastating to bear. I walked back to Officer Rodriguez and made a decision that would haunt me for the next few days. "Officer, my daughter has only had her license for 6 months. She is still learning to be responsible behind the wheel. I appreciate you handling this matter professionally." Emma stared at me in shock as Rodriguez handed her the citation for reckless driving. "Dad, you know I was not driving. Why are you not telling them the truth?" I knelt down and whispered in her ear, "Trust me, sweetheart. I know this seems wrong right now, but I have a plan. Do not say anything else to these officers. We will handle this properly, I promise you." But even as I said those words, I could see the light in Emma's eyes dim slightly. She had always believed her father would fight for her no matter what. Today she learned that sometimes the adults who are supposed to protect you make choices that feel like betrayal. After the police finished their reports and everyone dispersed from the scene, I drove Emma home in silence. She stared out the passenger window, her citation clutched in her trembling hands like evidence of some terrible injustice. When we pulled into our driveway on Oak Ridge Court, she finally spoke. "I do not understand why you did not defend me back there, Dad. Aunt Tracy was lying about everything, and you just let her get away with it. Emma, I need you to trust me on this. Sometimes situations are more complicated than they appear on the surface. I'm going to make this right, but I need to do it the smart way, not the emotional way." She nodded reluctantly and went upstairs to her room, but I could hear her crying through the thin walls of our modest 2-story house. The sound cut through me like a blade, but I knew that reacting emotionally at the crash site would have only made things worse. If my father was telling the truth about their financial situation, then Tracy held all the cards in this game. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and began writing down everything I could remember about the accident scene. The position of the driver's seat, the way Tracy's story changed slightly between her conversation with Officer Martinez and her conversation with Officer Rodriguez. The fact that she had called my parents before calling emergency services. Around 10 o'clock, I decided to drive back to the crash site to look for any evidence the police might have missed. The wreckage had been towed away, but I used my phone's flashlight to search the area around the oak tree. In the grass about 15 feet from the impact point, I found Tracy's prescription sunglasses, the expensive designer frames she had bought last year with money she claimed came from a bonus at her part-time job at the mall jewelry store. The glasses were intact, which meant they had fallen out during the crash, not during the aftermath. If Tracy had been a passenger, her glasses would have landed inside the vehicle or much closer to the passenger side. But these glasses were on the driver's side of the impact zone. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Emma's bank, First National on Main Street. As her father and co-signer on her checking account, I had access to her monthly statements. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Over the past 6 months, there had been 8 unauthorized withdrawals from Emma's account, each for amounts between $300 and $500. The withdrawals always occurred on weekdays when Emma was at school, and always at ATM machines in locations where Tracy had claimed to be babysitting Emma, even though my daughter had not needed a babysitter for years. The total stolen amount was $3,200, nearly half of Emma's college savings that she had earned working weekend shifts and summer hours at Scoop's Ice Cream. Tracy had been systematically draining her niece's bank account while pretending to be the caring aunt who helped out while Dad was working long construction hours. I drove home and checked Emma's bedroom for anything else that might be missing. In her jewelry box, I found her debit card, which meant Tracy had somehow obtained the PIN number. The only way she could have gotten that information was through my parents, who had helped Emma set up the account 2 years ago and knew her PIN was her birth month and year, 0807. When Emma came home from school that afternoon, I sat her down in our living room for a difficult conversation. The blue fabric couch that had belonged to her mother before the divorce suddenly felt too small for the weight of what I had to tell her. "Sweetheart, I need to show you something, and it is going to be very upsetting. But I want you to understand why I handled things the way I did yesterday." I showed her the bank statements with the highlighted, unauthorized withdrawals. Emma's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, realization, anger, and finally a deep sadness that seemed to age her several years in just a few minutes. "She has been stealing from me this whole time," Emma said quietly. "All those times she offered to drive me places or help me with errands, she was really just looking for opportunities to get into our house and take my information. I am afraid so. And I think yesterday's car accident was not really an accident. I think Tracy crashed your car because she was distracted while texting someone about money, and then she panicked and decided to blame you because she knew the family would protect her." Emma stood up and paced around our small living room, her sneakers squeaking on the hardwood floor that we had refinished together last summer. "So what do we do now? Do we call the police and tell them what really happened? Not yet. If we move too quickly, Tracy will claim that we are making up evidence to get revenge for the citation you received. We need to build a solid case that proves her guilt beyond any doubt. And we need to do it in a way that protects Grandma and Grandpa from the legal trouble they have gotten themselves into by helping her." I explained my father's revelation about the tax evasion and Tracy's gambling debts, watching Emma's expression grow more troubled with each detail. She was learning that adults could make choices that seemed impossible to understand, choices that hurt innocent people in the name of protecting guilty ones. "Dad, I do not want Grandma and Grandpa to go to jail. But I also do not want to be blamed for something I did not do. The kids at school are already talking about my reckless driving citation. My friend Katie heard from her mom that some people think I am a spoiled teenager who does not appreciate the nice things my family buys for me. That is going to change, I promised her. But we have to be patient and smart about how we handle this. I am going to contact some professionals who can help us gather evidence the right way. In the meantime, I want you to change your PIN number and keep your debit card with you at all times. And if Tracy contacts you for any reason, I want you to let me know immediately. That evening, I researched criminal defense attorneys in our area and found Marcus Williams, a lawyer who specialized in insurance fraud cases. His website mentioned experience with family-related financial crimes, which seemed like exactly what we needed. I scheduled a consultation for the following day. Before bed, I walked past Emma's room and heard her on the phone with her best friend Katie, explaining the real story of what had happened. I just do not understand how someone can look at you with love in their eyes and steal from you at the same time, she was saying. It makes me feel like I cannot trust my own judgment about people anymore. Listening to my daughter grapple with that level of betrayal at such a young age made me more determined than ever to see this through to the end. Tracy had not just stolen money and crashed a car. She had stolen Emma's sense of safety in her own family, and that was something I could not forgive or forget. My meeting with Marcus Williams took place in his office on 2nd Street, a converted Victorian house with creaky wooden floors and law books covering every available wall space. Marcus was a thin man in his 40s with prematurely gray hair and sharp green eyes that seemed to catalog every detail as I told Emma's story. Insurance fraud involving a minor is a serious felony, Marcus explained after I finished recounting the events. If your sister is convicted, she could face up to 5 years in prison and substantial fines. But the challenge here is that she has multiple witnesses supporting her version of events, including your parents. To build a successful case, we need evidence that contradicts their testimony in ways that cannot be explained by simple mistakes or memory lapses. What kind of evidence would that require? I asked. Phone records showing she was distracted while driving. Bank records proving the theft from your daughter's account. Physical evidence from the crash scene that contradicts her story. And ideally, some kind of confession or admission that demonstrates her intent to deceive. Marcus referred me to Detective Ray Morrison, a retired police investigator, who now worked as a private detective specializing in financial crimes. Ray operated out of a small office above Miller's hardware store, and when I met him the following morning, he impressed me with his methodical approach to building cases. The first thing we need to establish is a pattern of behavior, Ray explained as he took notes in a worn leather notebook. If your sister has done this before, there will be a trail. Insurance companies keep detailed records of claims, and they share information about suspicious patterns. Ray's initial research revealed troubling information. Over the past 2 years, Tracy had been listed as a witness or involved party in 4 different insurance claims involving teenage drivers. In each case, she had provided testimony that established the teenager as the at-fault driver, and in each case, the families had received substantial settlements. This suggests your sister has been running a sophisticated operation, Ray told me during our second meeting. She identifies families with teenage drivers and valuable vehicles, then creates situations where she can blame the teenagers for accidents that she actually causes. The families protect her because she presents herself as the responsible adult who is trying to help. Meanwhile, I installed security cameras around our house, small wireless units that would alert my phone if anyone entered the property while I was at work. I also changed all our door locks and made sure Emma understood never to give Tracy access to our house under any circumstances. The cameras paid off sooner than I expected. 3 days after installation, I received an alert while at the construction site. The footage showed Tracy entering our backyard through the gate and attempting to open our back door with a key. When that failed, she walked around to the front door and tried another key. She spent nearly 10 minutes testing different windows before finally leaving empty-handed. That evening, I confronted Emma about Tracy's attempted entry. Did you give your aunt a key to our house at any point in the past year? No, Dad, but I remember last winter when you were sick with the flu, Aunt Tracy offered to bring you soup and medicine. You told me to hide the spare key under the flower pot so she could get in without waking you up. I never thought about whether she made a copy. The realization that Tracy had been entering our home regularly for months made both Emma and me feel violated in ways that went beyond simple theft. She had been photographing documents, learning our routines, and planning her schemes while we trusted her completely. Detective Morrison's investigation revealed even more disturbing information about Tracy's activities. Using her name and social security number, he discovered that Tracy had opened 3 credit cards using Emma's information. The applications listed Emma's income as $12,000 per year from restaurant work, which was close enough to her actual ice cream shop wages to avoid triggering automatic verification calls. Tracy had maxed out all 3 cards with cash advances totaling $8,900. The money had been used to pay gambling debts, but also to fund her lifestyle of designer clothes, expensive dinners, and frequent spa treatments that our family had assumed she could afford through careful budgeting. Your daughter is now legally responsible for nearly $9,000 in debt that she never authorized, Morrison explained during our 3rd meeting. If we can prove your sister opened these accounts fraudulently, the debt will be transferred back to her. But until then, this will damage your daughter's credit rating and could affect her ability to get student loans for college. I felt the anger building inside me like pressure in a boiler. Tracy had not just stolen Emma's car and blamed her for the crash. She had systematically destroyed my daughter's financial future while pretending to be a loving aunt who cared about her success. The situation escalated further when Tracy filed a restraining order against me at the county courthouse. Her petition claimed that I had been harassing and threatening her since the accident, and that she feared for her safety. She included testimony from our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, who claimed to have heard me screaming threats through the thin wall that separated our houses. Mrs. Kowalski was 82 years old and had significant hearing problems, but Tracy had convinced her that the raised voices she occasionally heard were me threatening violence, rather than me practicing presentations for work or talking on speakerphone with clients during evening hours. The restraining order prevented me from contacting Tracy directly, which complicated our investigation. But it also revealed how desperate Tracy was becoming. Filing false legal documents suggested she knew her lies were unraveling and she needed legal protection from the consequences of her actions. Emma's emotional state continued to deteriorate as the stress mounted. She quit her job at Scoop's Ice Cream because she could not handle the sympathetic looks from customers who had heard about her reckless driving. Her grades dropped from straight A's to C's and D's as she struggled to concentrate on schoolwork, while worrying about legal consequences she did not deserve. "I feel like everyone at school is looking at me differently," Emma told me one evening as we ate dinner at our small kitchen table. "Even the teachers treat me like I'm some kind of problem child now. Mrs. Henderson asked me if I needed counseling to deal with my risk-taking behaviors." I wanted to tell her the truth, but I know she would not believe me. Watching my daughter suffer for crimes she did not commit was the hardest thing I had ever experienced as a father. But I knew that rushing to clear her name without solid evidence would only make Tracy's lies seem more credible. We needed to be patient and thorough, even though patience felt like torture. The local newspaper, the Valley Tribune, published a small article about the accident with the headline, "Local Teens Reckless Driving Sparks Family Concern." The article quoted Tracy extensively about the growing problem of teenage drivers who receive expensive cars before they develop mature judgment behind the wheel. Reading my sister's sanctimonious quotes about teenage responsibility while knowing she had stolen thousands of dollars from Emma made me realize that Tracy was not just a criminal. She was a sociopath who felt no guilt about destroying a child's reputation to save herself from consequences. But Detective Morrison assured me that sociopaths often make mistakes when they feel cornered, and Tracy's restraining order suggested she was beginning to panic. "Criminals who file false legal documents usually do it because they know they are about to be exposed," he told me. "She is trying to control the narrative before we can present evidence that contradicts her story. That means we are getting close to something that scares her." Detective Morrison's next discovery changed everything about how I understood Tracy's criminal activities. Using contacts in federal law enforcement, he learned that Tracy's gambling debts were not owed to underground poker games, but to Eduardo Torres, a man who operated a money laundering scheme through a chain of businesses downtown that advertised as massage parlors but actually processed illegal cash transactions. Your sister is not just a gambling addict, Morrison explained during our meeting at a coffee shop on 5th Street, away from his office where we could speak more privately. She is working as a recruiter for a federal money laundering operation. Her job is to identify families with clean credit histories who can be manipulated into participating unknowingly in financial crimes. According to Morrison's research, Eduardo Torres paid Tracy $2,000 per month to recruit family members who could be used to process fake transactions through legitimate businesses. My parents' lawn care company, Sunset Lawn Care, had been processing invoices for non-existent clients, all paid in cash, that Tracy provided from Eduardo's operation. The $78,000 in income that your parents reported this year came entirely from Torres. Morrison continued, "Your parents think they are helping Tracy pay gambling debts, but they are actually washing drug money and proceeds from human trafficking operations." I felt sick as I realized the scope of what Tracy had done to our family. She had not just stolen money and crashed a car. She had turned my elderly parents into unwitting accomplices in federal crimes that could send them to prison for decades. "What happens to my parents if this comes out?" I asked. "If they cooperate fully and testify truthfully about Tracy's role, the federal prosecutors will likely offer them plea agreements with probation and restitution rather than prison time. But if they continue lying to protect Tracy, they will be charged as co-conspirators in the money laundering scheme." Morrison also revealed that the insurance company's fraud investigation had expanded beyond Emma's case. Tracy had been flagged in a database that tracked suspicious patterns across multiple states. Similar accidents involving teenage family members had been reported in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, always with Tracy as the responsible adult witness, who helped establish teenagers as at-fault drivers. "She has been running this operation for at least 3 years, Morrison told me. "She targets families with teenagers who own valuable vehicles, creates opportunities for accidents, then blames the teenagers while collecting insurance settlements. The families protect her because she appears to be helping them avoid worse consequences." Armed with this information, I decided to set a trap for Tracy that would expose her true intentions. Working with Morrison and attorney Marcus Williams, we created a fake scenario designed to reveal Tracy's planning process for future schemes. I contacted my cousin Danny, who lived in the next town and owned a restored 1967 Mustang that he had spent years rebuilding. Danny and I had not been close since childhood, but when I explained the situation, he agreed to help catch Tracy. "I want her to pay for what she did to Emma," Danny said when we met at his garage. "That kid has always been special, and anyone who would hurt her deserves whatever consequences they get." Danny called Tracy and mentioned casually that he was worried about Emma being around his classic car when he visited for upcoming family gatherings. He suggested that Emma's reckless driving problems made him nervous about having his valuable vehicle anywhere near her. Tracy's response was immediate and telling. She volunteered to talk to Emma about being more careful around valuable vehicles and asked detailed questions about Danny's insurance coverage. She specifically wanted to know if he would be willing to help family if something unfortunate happened to his car while Emma was nearby. "She is already planning her next scheme," Morrison observed when we reviewed the recorded conversation. "She wants to establish Emma as a repeat offender who cannot be trusted around valuable vehicles. That would make future accusations more credible." Meanwhile, the federal investigation was moving quickly. Eduardo Torres had been arrested in an unrelated DEA raid on his massage parlor operation, and facing life in prison on trafficking charges, he immediately began cooperating with federal prosecutors. Torres provided detailed records of his money laundering network, including spreadsheets showing payments to Sunset Lawn Care and Tracy's role as a family recruiter. According to his records, Tracy had earned $31,000 over 18 months for identifying and manipulating 12 different families across the region. Agent Sarah Castellanos from the FBI contacted me directly to discuss the federal investigation. Meeting her at the federal building downtown felt surreal, like stepping into a television crime drama rather than my actual life. Ms. Brennan has been a significant asset to Torres's operation, Agent Castellanos explained in her sterile conference room office. She has a talent for identifying targets and gaining their trust quickly. Her technique is to approach families during emotional or financial stress periods when they are most vulnerable to manipulation. Agent Castellanos showed me photographs of other families that Tracy had targeted, including a single mother in Ohio, whose son was blamed for crashing into a storefront, and a divorced father in Pennsylvania, whose daughter was accused of destroying a neighbor's fence with her car. In every case, Ms. Brennan positioned herself as the helpful family friend who witnessed teenage recklessness. The families protected her because they believed she was trying to minimize consequences for their children. They never realized that she had caused the accidents deliberately and was collecting money from both insurance settlements and Torres for her participation. Learning about Tracy's other victims made me understand that Emma's case was not personal revenge or family dysfunction. Tracy was a professional criminal who had chosen our family as targets in a calculated business operation. What Tracy did to your daughter was not emotional or impulsive, Agent Castellanos continued. She spent months studying your family's routines, finances, and vulnerabilities before creating the car accident scenario. She chose Emma specifically because teenagers are easier to discredit and less likely to be believed when they claim innocence. The FBI had been building their case against Torres and his network for 2 years, but they needed Tracy's cooperation to prosecute the higher-level operators who controlled the trafficking and money laundering operations. However, Tracy's restraining order and continued lies about the car accident suggested she planned to fight the charges rather than cooperate. We need your daughter's case to demonstrate that Miss Brennan engaged in insurance fraud and conspiracy, Agent Castellanos explained. If we can prove she deliberately caused the accident and blamed your daughter falsely, that establishes her willingness to commit crimes against family members. That pattern of behavior supports the larger case against the entire criminal network. I realized that Emma's courage in insisting on her innocence was not just about clearing her own name. She was helping expose a criminal organization that had hurt multiple families and would continue hurting others if Tracy was not stopped. But I also realized that Tracy, facing decades in federal prison, would become increasingly desperate as the investigation closed in around her. Desperate criminals make unpredictable choices, and my primary concern was keeping Emma safe while we built the case that would finally bring justice. My sister totaled my 16-year-old's brand new car and then called the cops on her. Agent Castellanos and Detective Morrison worked together to create an elaborate sting operation designed to catch Tracy planning her next scheme. Using federal surveillance equipment, they monitored Tracy's phone calls and tracked her movements as she began researching Emma's daily routines and looking for opportunities to create another accident. The breakthrough came when Tracy contacted 3 different auto body shops in town asking for estimates on repairing damage to a teenager's car that had not been damaged yet. She provided specific details about paint color and model year that matched Danny's Mustang, exactly suggesting she was planning to cause damage, and then claim Emma had crashed into something while driving Danny's car without permission. She is preparing to escalate her accusations against Emma, Morrison explained during our strategy meeting at Marcus Williams' law office. If she can establish Emma as a repeat offender who steals cars and crashes them, it will make her original story about your daughter's recklessness seem more credible. But Tracy's plan required Emma to have access to Danny's car, which meant Tracy needed to create a scenario where Emma would be alone with the vehicle. Morrison and Agent Castellanos decided to give Tracy exactly what she wanted, but under controlled circumstances where they could document her actions. Danny agreed to visit our house for a family barbecue, bringing his Mustang and parking it in our driveway where Tracy could observe it from across the street. We invited Tracy to the barbecue through our parents, knowing she would decline, but used the opportunity to scout our property and plan her next move. Hidden cameras captured Tracy driving slowly past our house 4 times during the barbecue, stopping each time to photograph Danny's car and study the layout of our driveway. Phone surveillance revealed her calling an unknown contact and saying, "The setup is perfect. The kid will have access tomorrow morning when the adults leave for work." But the most damaging evidence came when Tracy called her insurance company and inquired about expanding her coverage to include occasional driving of family members' vintage vehicles. She specifically asked about coverage limits for classic cars and whether her policy would protect her if an inexperienced driver caused damage while she was supervising. She is creating a paper trail that makes it look like she was being responsible by getting proper insurance coverage, Agent Castellanos observed. But what she is actually doing is setting up another insurance fraud scheme where she can collect money for damage that she plans to cause herself. Meanwhile, Emma's courage throughout this ordeal continued to impress everyone involved in the investigation. Despite the stress of being falsely accused and watching her reputation suffer, she maintained her insistence on telling the truth and refused to accept any compromise that would let Tracy avoid consequences. "I do not want any other kids to go through what I have been through," Emma told Agent Castellanos during one of their interviews. "If Aunt Tracy has done this to other families, then stopping her is more important than making my own problems go away quickly." Emma's maturity and moral clarity provided a stark contrast to Tracy's selfishness and deception. Watching my daughter find strength in doing the right thing even when it was difficult made me proud of the person she was becoming despite the challenges Tracy had created. The federal case reached a turning point when Eduardo Torres provided prosecutors with recorded phone conversations between himself and Tracy, discussing specific details of the car crash scheme. In one recording, Tracy could be heard saying, "The kid's car was perfect for this. Good insurance coverage, emotional value to the family, and a teenage driver that nobody will believe over a responsible adult." In another recording, Tracy described her method for causing accidents that would appear to be teenage driver error. "You wait until they are distracted by their phone or music, then you grab the wheel and steer into something solid. The impact throws everyone around, so physical evidence gets mixed up. Then you claim you tried to help them steer, but could not prevent the crash." These recordings provided federal prosecutors with direct evidence of Tracy's criminal intent and her systematic approach to targeting families. They also revealed that the car accident involving Emma was not Tracy's first attempt at this specific scheme, but rather the refinement of a technique she had been developing over months of practice. But as the federal investigation became more focused on Tracy, she began taking increasingly desperate measures to avoid prosecution. Phone surveillance revealed her contacting a bail bondsman and researching methods for leaving the country quickly. Most troubling, she had been asking questions about Emma's daily schedule and seemed to be planning some kind of direct action against my daughter. "Your sister knows that Emma is the key witness who can contradict her story about the car accident," Agent Castellanos warned me during an urgent phone call. "If Emma changes her testimony or becomes unavailable to testify, Tracy's defense becomes much stronger. We have reason to believe she may attempt to intimidate or harm your daughter to prevent her from cooperating with our investigation." This warning led to Emma being placed under federal protection with unmarked agents monitoring her movements to and from school. Our house was equipped with additional security measures, and Emma was given an emergency contact number that would connect her directly to Agent Castellanos if Tracy attempted any contact. The protection proved necessary when Tracy made her most desperate move yet. Claiming there had been a family emergency, she called Emma at school and asked her to leave immediately to meet Joel at the hospital. Tracy's story was that I had been injured in a construction accident and was asking for Emma specifically. But Emma remembered my instructions about trusting her instincts and verifying any emergency information through official channels. Instead of leaving with Tracy, she called the number Agent Castellanos had given her and reported the contact attempt immediately. Within minutes, federal agents had tracked Tracy's location and discovered she was not at any hospital, but rather driving toward the interstate, with a bag packed in her back seat and a fake identification card with Emma's photograph but Tracy's information. She was planning to kidnap your daughter and assume her identity to flee the country, Agent Castellanos explained after Tracy's arrest. She had been studying Emma's appearance and mannerisms for weeks, preparing to impersonate her long enough to get across the border into Mexico. The kidnapping attempt provided federal prosecutors with additional serious charges against Tracy, including conspiracy child endangerment and attempted identity theft. More importantly, it demonstrated to my parents that Tracy was not the troubled but redeemable sister they had been protecting, but a dangerous criminal who would hurt their own granddaughter to avoid consequences. Tracy's attempted kidnapping of Emma finally shattered the wall of family protection that had enabled her crimes for so long. When federal agents arrested Tracy on the interstate just outside the city limits, they found detailed plans for establishing a new identity in Mexico using documents stolen from multiple family members. In Tracy's car, agents discovered Emma's birth certificate, social security card, and passport, along with Tracy's own documents altered to match Emma's physical description. Tracy had been planning to cross the border as Emma Brennan, leaving my real daughter to face kidnapping charges while Tracy disappeared into a new life, funded by money laundered through Eduardo Torres's criminal network. The evidence was so overwhelming that even my parents could no longer maintain their loyalty to Tracy. When Agent Castellanos showed them the kidnapping plan and explained how Tracy had manipulated them into money laundering, my father broke down completely. "We thought we were helping our daughter pay gambling debts," Dad told Agent Castellanos during his interview at the federal building. "Tracy showed us documents that made it look like she owed money to dangerous people who would hurt her if she could not pay. We never imagined she was working for those dangerous people using our business to wash their money." Mom's reaction was even more emotional. She had always seen Tracy as her baby girl, who needed extra protection and support. Learning that Tracy had planned to kidnap Emma and assume her identity destroyed Mom's ability to rationalize or excuse Tracy's behavior. "I chose to protect the wrong child." Mom sobbed during her interview with federal agents. "Emma has always been honest and responsible, but I believed Tracy's lies because I wanted to believe that Tracy could change. I failed as a grandmother, and I failed as a mother." My parents' decision to cooperate fully with federal investigators provided prosecutors with detailed evidence of Tracy's money laundering activities through Sunset Lawn Care. Their business records showed exactly how Tracy had used their legitimate company to process payments for non-existent services, creating clean money for Eduardo Torres's criminal operations. The cooperation also revealed the full scope of Tracy's manipulation tactics. She had convinced my parents that they were participating in a temporary arrangement to help her pay one-time gambling debts, when in reality they were processing regular monthly payments that had continued for over a year. Tracy told us that each payment was the last one, that she had learned her lesson and would never gamble again. Dad explained to Agent Castellanos. Every month she would show up crying about how sorry she was and how this payment would finally get her clear of debt. We wanted to believe her because cutting her off seemed like abandoning our own daughter. Meanwhile, Emma's vindication came through multiple channels simultaneously. The insurance company's investigation concluded that Tracy had been driving at the time of the accident, based on phone records proving she was texting while driving, and physical evidence showing the driver's seat position was adjusted for someone taller than Emma. The local police department issued a formal apology for the reckless driving citation and removed it completely from Emma's record. Officer Rodriguez personally delivered the apology letter to our house, explaining that the department had reviewed all evidence and concluded that Emma had been falsely accused. "Your daughter handled this situation with remarkable maturity," Officer Rodriguez told me. as we stood on our front porch. She never wavered from telling the truth, even when it seemed like nobody believed her. That kind of integrity is rare in adults, much less teenagers. The Valley Tribune published a front-page correction and apology with the headline, "Local Teen Vindicated Adult Family Members Face Federal Charges." The article detailed how federal investigators had exposed Tracy's criminal network and Emma's role as an innocent victim who had been systematically victimized by her own aunt. But the most satisfying vindication came from Emma's school and community. Her teachers apologized for treating her like a problem student, and several classmates who had been spreading rumors about her reckless driving made public apologies in person. Mrs. Henderson, Emma's counselor, who had suggested therapy for risk-taking behaviors, sent a written apology acknowledging that Emma's emotional distress had been caused by being falsely accused rather than by guilt over reckless behavior. "I should have recognized that Emma was exhibiting signs of someone who had been victimized, not someone who was covering up mistakes," Mrs. Henderson wrote. "Her consistency in maintaining innocence should have been seen as evidence of truthfulness rather than defiance." The insurance company not only paid for Emma's car replacement, but also provided a settlement of $45,000 for the fraudulent claims made against her driving record. More importantly, they flagged Tracy in a national database that would prevent her from manipulating insurance claims in the future. Tracy's federal trial proceeded quickly once she realized the evidence against her was overwhelming. Facing charges of money laundering, insurance fraud, conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, child endangerment, and identity theft, she accepted a plea agreement rather than risk a trial that could have resulted in a life sentence. The judge sentenced Tracy to 8 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 5 years. During the sentencing hearing, the judge specifically noted Tracy's betrayal of family trust and systematic targeting of a minor as aggravating factors that warranted the maximum sentence under the plea agreement. The defendant chose to victimize her own family members, including a 16-year-old girl who trusted her completely, Judge Patricia Morales stated during sentencing. "This represents not just criminal behavior, but a profound moral failure that caused lasting psychological harm to a child. My parents received 2 years of probation and were required to pay $89,000 in restitution to federal authorities, but they avoided prison time due to their ages and cooperation with the investigation. They used their home as collateral to establish a college fund for Emma as additional restitution for their role in her victimization. We cannot undo the pain we caused Emma by choosing to protect Tracy over protecting the truth," Dad told the judge during their sentencing hearing. "But we can spend the rest of our lives working to rebuild Emma's trust and support her future in whatever ways she will allow." The federal investigation also led to the arrests of 12 other individuals in Eduardo Torres's money laundering network, including several people who had been manipulated by Tracy into participating unknowingly in criminal activities. Emma's courage in insisting on the truth had helped expose a criminal organization that stretched across 4 states and had victimized dozens of families. 6 months after Tracy's sentencing, Emma and I had settled into a new routine that felt both familiar and completely different from our life before the car accident. Emma returned to work at Scoop's Ice Cream, where her manager promoted her to shift supervisor and increased her hourly wage from $9 to $12 per hour in recognition of how she had handled the crisis. Emma showed more maturity and integrity during her legal troubles than most adults show during normal circumstances. Her manager explained when offering the promotion, "If she can stay calm and honest under that kind of pressure, she can handle anything this job might throw at her." Emma's grades not only recovered to her previous straight A level, but she actually improved her GPA by throwing herself into her studies with renewed focus. She started taking advanced placement courses in criminal justice and psychology, inspired by her experiences with Detective Morrison and Agent Castellanos. "I want to understand how people like Aunt Tracy think," Emma explained when she signed up for forensic psychology. not to excuse what she did, but to help other families recognize manipulation before it destroys their relationships. Emma also started a peer support group at school for teenagers who had experienced family betrayal or legal troubles. The group began with just Emma and 2 other students, but grew to include 12 regular members who met weekly to discuss their experiences and support each other through difficult family situations. It helps to talk with other kids who understand what it feels like when adults you trust make choices that hurt you, Emma told me after one of their meetings. Some of these kids have parents who are addicted to drugs or alcohol. Others have family members who have committed crimes. We all know what it feels like to love someone who has caused you pain. My relationship with Emma strengthened tremendously throughout this ordeal. She later told me that my initial silence at the crash scene had confused and hurt her, but watching me methodically build a case against Tracy taught her valuable lessons about strategic thinking versus emotional reactions. I learned that sometimes protecting someone you love means making choices that hurt in the moment, but serve justice in the long run, Emma said during one of our evening conversations on our back porch. You could have defended me immediately and made us both feel better temporarily, but then Aunt Tracy might have gotten away with everything she was doing. Emma's decision to study criminal justice in college was influenced by the professionals who had helped us navigate the legal system. Detective Morrison offered her a summer internship with his private investigation firm, while attorney Marcus Williams provided a scholarship covering her first year's tuition at the state university. Agent Castellanos had visited Emma's criminal justice class to speak about federal law enforcement careers, and Emma surprised everyone by asking detailed questions about financial crimes and family manipulation tactics. Your daughter has a natural understanding of how criminals think and how victims respond, Agent Castellanos told me after her presentation. If she decides to pursue federal law enforcement, she would bring valuable perspective to cases involving family-based crimes. The community's response to Emma's vindication was overwhelming and positive. Her friend Katie organized a fundraiser that raised $3,200 to replace everything Tracy had stolen from Emma's bank account with contributions from classmates, teachers, and local business owners who had followed the story in the newspaper. The principal of Emma's high school issued a public apology for the harassment Emma had faced from other students and implemented new policies about cyberbullying related to legal cases involving students. We learned that our students were spreading rumors and making judgments based on incomplete information, Principal Johnson announced during a school assembly. Emma's case taught us that supporting our students means reserving judgment until facts are established, not participating in gossip that can cause real harm. My relationship with my parents required significant work to rebuild, but family therapy helped us navigate the complex emotions involved in their choices during the crisis. They genuinely had not understood that they were participating in money laundering, but they also had chosen to protect Tracy over protecting Emma when forced to make a decision. We failed Emma when she needed us most, Mom acknowledged during one of our therapy sessions. We let our love for Tracy cloud our judgment about what was right and wrong. That is not something Emma should have to forgive, but we hope she will give us the chance to earn her trust back over time. Dad struggled more with accepting responsibility, but eventually acknowledged that his threats to cut me out of their will had been attempts to manipulate me into protecting Tracy rather than seeking justice for Emma. I was so afraid of losing Tracy to prison and losing our house to federal seizure that I forgot my responsibility to protect my granddaughter, Dad admitted. Fear made me choose protecting assets over protecting people, and that was wrong. Emma chose to maintain a relationship with my parents, but on terms that she established. She visited them weekly for dinner, but made it clear that rebuilding trust would take years of consistent behavior that demonstrated her well-being was their priority. I love Grandma and Grandpa, but I also understand now that loving someone does not mean accepting choices that hurt other people, Emma told me. They can earn my trust back by showing that they have learned from their mistakes, not by expecting me to forget what happened. The financial restitution from Tracy's criminal case and my parents' civil settlement provided Emma with enough money for 4 years of college tuition, plus graduate school, if she chose to pursue advanced degrees. More importantly, the experience had given her clarity about her career goals and a mature understanding of how legal systems protect victims of crime. I used to think that justice meant punishment for bad people, Emma reflected as we planned her college visits. Now I understand that justice means restoration for victims and education for communities so that these crimes do not happen again. Detective Morrison remained a mentor to Emma throughout her senior year of high school, teaching her basic investigation techniques and explaining how evidence is gathered and analyzed. Emma's final project for her criminal justice class was a detailed analysis of her own case, which she presented to other students as an example of how family-based financial crimes operate. Emma has turned her victimization into education for others, Detective Morrison observed after her presentation. She understands that sharing her story can help other families recognize warning signs before they become victims themselves. The most meaningful recognition came when Emma received the Student Courage Award from the State Attorney General's office for her role in exposing Tracy's criminal network. The award recognized students who showed exceptional bravery in reporting crimes or assisting law enforcement investigations. Emma Brennan demonstrated that integrity and courage are not defined by age, Attorney General Williams stated during the award ceremony. Her refusal to accept false accusations and her insistence on telling the truth led to the exposure of a criminal organization that had victimized multiple families across several states. As Emma prepared for college, she often reflected on the life lessons that emerged from our family's crisis. She had learned that people she trusted completely could make choices that hurt her deeply, but she had also learned that other people would step forward to help when she needed support most. I think the most important thing I learned is that family loyalty should never come at the expense of truth and integrity, Emma said as we packed her belongings for her freshman year at college. Real family bonds are strengthened by honesty, not weakened by it. Our drive past the oak tree on Maple Street had become a monthly ritual during Emma's senior year. She had placed a small memorial plaque there reading, "In memory of blind trust, in celebration of earned trust." The plaque served as a reminder that trust is not something that should be given automatically, but something that should be earned through consistent behavior over time. I used to think that questioning family members meant I did not love them enough, Emma told me during one of our visits to the memorial. Now I know that holding each other accountable is actually how we show love and respect for each other. Looking back on our ordeal, I realized that Tracy's crimes had ultimately made Emma and me stronger as a family unit. We had learned to communicate more directly about difficult topics, to trust each other's judgment even when situations seemed confusing, and to prioritize truth over comfort when making important decisions. Dad, I know this whole experience was painful and scary, but I am grateful for what it taught us about each other, Emma said as we prepared for her departure to college. I learned that you will fight for me even when fighting is difficult and complicated. And you learned that I will tell the truth even when telling the truth makes my life harder. The final chapter of Tracy's story came when she was transferred to a federal prison in another state to serve her sentence. She had not attempted to contact Emma or apologize for her actions, which Agent Castellanos explained was typical for criminals who never accepted responsibility for their choices. Some people commit crimes because they make bad decisions in desperate moments, Agent Castellanos told us. Others commit crimes because they fundamentally believe they are entitled to take what they want from other people. Your sister falls into the second category, which means she is unlikely to change even after serving her prison sentence. But Emma had found peace with Tracy's lack of remorse by focusing on the positive changes that had emerged from their crisis. Emma's support group at school continued to grow and help other students navigate family crises. Detective Morrison hired 2 additional staff members to handle the increase in family-based financial crime cases that had been reported after Emma's story became public. Sometimes bad people do terrible things and we cannot control that. Almdar, Emma observed during our final conversation before she left for college. But we can control how we respond to terrible things, and we can use our experiences to help other people who face similar challenges. As Emma began her freshman year studying criminal justice, she carried with her a mature understanding of how legal systems work, how families can be both sources of support and sources of harm, and how individual courage can create positive changes that extend far beyond personal circumstances. I want to spend my career helping families like ours, Emma told me during one of our weekly phone calls after she started college. Families that love each other, but need help understanding the difference between loyalty and enabling, between protecting people and protecting harmful behavior. Our family's story became a case study used by the FBI to train agents who investigate financial crimes involving family members. Emma participated in several training sessions as a victim advocate, sharing her perspective on how these crimes affect children and teenagers specifically. The most important thing law enforcement officers need to understand is that family-based crimes create confusion for victims in ways that stranger crimes do not, Emma explained during one training session. When someone you love and trust victimizes you, it makes you question your own judgment about people and relationships. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized that Emma's strength and integrity throughout our ordeal had taught me as much about courage and character as my guidance had taught her about patience and strategy. She had refused to compromise her principles even when doing so would have made her life easier in the short term. The most valuable thing you can give your children is not money or opportunities, I reflected during a conversation with Marcus Williams after Emma's first year of college. It is the confidence to trust their own moral judgment and the courage to act on their convictions even when acting is difficult. Emma's story continues to inspire other families who face betrayal and manipulation from trusted family members. She frequently speaks at community events about recognizing financial abuse and supporting family members who report crimes committed by relatives. Justice is not just about punishment for people who commit crimes, Emma told audiences during her speaking engagements. Justice is about restoration for people who have been harmed and education for communities so that harmful patterns do not continue. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what was right? Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who test our principles in the most difficult ways. Emma's courage to insist on the truth, even when it meant standing alone against family pressure, ultimately protected not just her own future, but other families who might have become Tracy's next victims. If this story resonates with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that choosing truth over comfort is always the right decision, even when it feels impossible in the moment. Like this video. If Emma's courage inspired you, subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people who find extraordinary strength during their most challenging moments, and comment below about a time when you had to stand up for what was right, despite pressure to stay quiet. Thank you for listening to our family story. I hope Emma's example encourages you to trust your own moral instincts and remember that real love means holding each other accountable for doing better, not accepting harmful behavior because changing it seems too difficult. May your own family relationships be strengthened by honesty and built on the foundation of earned trust rather than blind loyalty.